Hello, everyone. Welcome. Use the chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. I'm in Seattle. So is Hsiao-Ching. Henry and Michelle are in the Bay Area. Seattle, Sue, hello. Welcome. Chicago, hello. We'll let a few more of you get tuned in and then we'll get started. Indiana, hello. New York, hi. So this is the great part, right? Like you can join us from all over the place. Houston, hello. Another Houston. Houston representing tonight. All right. Oh, St. Louis. I grew up near St. Louis. Deep Ballard. Hi. Milwaukee, Anacortes. Hello, hello. All right. We're going to let that number go up a little more and then we'll get started. Laurel, Maryland, Orlando. Hello. Kirkwood, Missouri. Hello. All righty. I think we're going to go ahead and get started then. Hi, everyone. I'm Lara Hamilton. I have a cookbook shop here in Seattle, Washington. It's called Book Larder. And we had just started to do some in-person events again when Omicron sort of took all of us by surprise. And we had planned to originally, as many of you know, do this event with Michelle and Henry in person, and then have a Zoom event as a follow-up, but we decided to sort of merge them into one and invite everyone to join us on Zoom tonight. So thank you so much for your flexibility and for being here. We are, of course, celebrating this fantastic new book of theirs, Nom Nom Paleo, Let's Go. It is their third cookbook. And Henry and Michelle were kind enough to stop by Book Larder and sign copies of the book. And so we have some signed copies, and they also left us with these little stickers. So when you order the book from us, I will drop a note in the chat so that I'll make that easy for you. You will get a signed copy and some of those stickers while supplies last. And thank you to everyone who's done that already. Henry and Michelle are going to be in conversation with local author Hsiao-Ching Chou. They are going to talk about the book, of course, and they're also going to talk about Lunar New Year, which we are right in the middle of right now. They will leave time for questions, so please use the little Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you have questions, you can use that chat feature to talk to each other. Use the Q&A if you have questions for Hsiao-Ching and Michelle and Henry. The talk tonight is being recorded, and so within the next couple of days that will be posted on our YouTube channel. There are all kinds of author talks up there if you want to check it out and see what we've been up to over the past, 2 years almost now. Those are, of course, just free to watch at your leisure. All right. Please join me in welcoming Hsiao-Ching Chou and Henry Fong and Michelle Tam.
Hello, everybody. Hey, Michelle and Henry. I love your bookshelf. I know we were talking about it right before we got on camera, but I sort of have this a love-hate relationship with the color-coded bookshelf. Apparently, you all are divided, a house divided.
Yes, Henry likes the whole color coding because he is very into visual stuff. And
I find it more visually compelling, and I can
a lot of people do as well. Like whenever we post the bookshelf, people are like, "Oh, that's so awesome!" And I'm like, "No, it looks awesome, but functionally, it's the pits. You can never find anything unless you know what color the spine of something is, and most of the time, I don't know."
I've spent a lot of time memorizing which color each spine of the cookbooks on the shelf actually is, and so it's actually been a good memory exercise for me. But don't test me.
No, but I also think people assume this is all of our cookbooks, and unfortunately for Henry, because he hates clutter, this is not all of them. I have tons of books, and a lot of my books are actually on my nightstand, and so things kind of come in and out of this big bookshelf. And so yeah, so sometimes like my book's not up there, I'm like, well, I have your book, I swear, but it's just not here because I actually use it. Or,
We
you know,
have
I've
one,
like
two,
rotated
three,
stuff out.
4 other bookcases that are
Yes.
filled with her cookbooks, but those are not color coordinated at all.
No.
Those are really just the ones that are temporarily out of rotation and they'll come back in here eventually.
Yeah.
But it kind of speaks to both of your personalities as well as your specific skill set, right? With Michelle, you're the one who you focus on developing the recipes, which is a very analytical type of activity. And Henry, you work on the visuals and drawing, doing all the illustrations and doing the photography. And so it kind of makes sense. So maybe I should probably backtrack a little bit, but tell me first, like how does that play out in your relationship, your working relationship, I should say?
Yeah, so that actually, what you said, I think encapsulates it really well. I provide the recipes and the snark, and Henry does all of the visual stuff and all the fun stuff that people like the comics.
Yeah, nobody
the
likes the
photos.
recipes. It's just
No, but I think like the design, like Henry literally designs them cover to cover. Like he designed literally the cover, the end pages, the way it's laid out. And, you know, we decided to do this with our first book, and we've just kind of continued that for all 3. And that's why when people say, when are you gonna have another one? You're like, maybe this is it. It takes a lot of time and we're old. This may be it.
It's a great question because we do see ourselves playing this out in all sorts of aspects of recipe creation, because Michelle will often really focus on the best tasting, most umami packed dish that she can, and I will hover over her shoulder and be like, yeah, but it's another stew that's gonna kind of look like brown mush. So can we do something to this to make it a little bit more visually appealing? And so we often have that conversation.
Yeah, but you know, the good thing is the things that Henry cares about, I don't care about, and the things I care about, he doesn't care about. And so we kind of just let each other take control of the thing that we care about. And obviously, if there's something that we both like that we feel strongly about, but normally we don't feel that strongly about the thing that the other person cares about.
We'll go take a walk around the neighborhood, and by the time we're done, we usually have figured it out.
Yeah, so that's the thing, like during pandemic, that's all we could do is like take a walk around the neighborhood to kind of decompress. But every time we went and took a walk around the neighborhood, it would always be a conversation about the book. And I was like, dude, this is supposed to be when we're supposed to be relaxing and decompressing. And instead it's like, what do you think about this? And how about this joke? And what about this? And I was like, stop. But you know, it's good. We got it all worked out.
Well, you're complimentary, right? So I think that's a beautiful thing. So we're going to assume that most people are nomsters, but you know, for those of us, or for those who are joining us for the first time and don't really know about your background, maybe talk a little bit about, you know, what Nom Nom is about.
So I started Nom Nom Paleo back in October 2010. And I started as a Tumblr blog. And I only started it because I had kind of discovered this paleo way of eating. And at the time I was like, oh, this makes me feel so great. Like, how come I never thought about how food made me feel? And I felt like I swallowed the red pill, you know, in the Matrix, and I felt like my eyes, you know, were finally open. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to tell everyone about this. Like, because then their lives will be changed like mine was. But then, like, my sister took me aside and said, Michelle, I'm really happy that you found this way of eating, but you're super annoying and you need to, like, simmer down. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll put it up on the internet. Like, I'll start a blog, because I love food blogs, but I didn't think at the time that I had anything to add. You know, and at the time I was like, oh, it's super saturated. There's no, but I was like, oh, maybe I could do a paleo food blog. But I didn't think anyone was going to read it. And so Henry, I think, just bought the domain name because he's like, you know, if you did a food blog, what would you call it? I'm like, oh, Nom Nom Paleo. And so it was a total offhand name that we've kind of stuck with. And then I started just writing about what I ate every day. And I was working as a night shift pharmacist at the hospital. And so I was like, oh, I think it would be useful for me to tell people what I, pack for lunches or when I go out to eat, what I can order. But then I realized, I can't really go out to eat anymore because there's no, it's not really paleo. And so I was like, okay, then I'm going to have to figure out recipes. And at first I was just kind of making other people's recipes paleo. And then I realized after, learning more about food blogging, you can't just do that. You have to come up with your own recipes. And so there was just a big learning curve because like none of this was anything I thought was going to be a career or anything long term. It just was something fun, and the pictures were awful because I just used my iPhone, and it was all at night. It was all stuff that I was shooting before I went to work at night. And I was just quickly shooting stuff because I had to feed the family before I went to work. And then I think in like 2012, Henry was like, gosh, your pictures,
It was well before that.
Oh, yeah, it might have been before that. But then he was like, really, you can't just use better light or you can't focus. And I was like, I don't have time to focus. Like, I'm just quickly, and no one's reading it anyway. It doesn't matter. And so then eventually it's like, no, I think people are reading it. You really should, what about this rule of threes and this and that? I was like, I don't know any of that stuff. So if you want it to look better, then you should come and help me. And so then Henry did started taking pictures. And so Henry has a day job, which is really busy. But then on weekends and evenings, he helps with Nom Nom Paleo stuff like that.
Or when we go on a walk and I can decompress from my day job, I end
Yes.
up bugging her about cookbooks and such. But yeah, Michelle's right. Like when we started, it was really just I think watching from afar at first, it was really just Michelle trying to find ways to really satisfy her own palate, but in a way that was paleo friendly, and finding it very, very difficult to do so. And even some of the paleo blogs that she saw at the time tended to focus on food as fuel for exercise, right? It was all about like how many, what are the gains I'm going to have in the gym? And she was like, that's not how I eat. And that's also not what makes eating enjoyable. There was really a lack of Asian cooking, for instance, on paleo blogs. And there was, but yet Asian cooking often has things like gluten in it in the form of soy sauce or other ingredients that don't agree with Michelle. And so she was really working hard to find ways to flip the script a little bit and make things work for her palate, because she knew that in order to make this kind of way, this way of eating sustainable, it had to be one that she found to be delicious as well.
And
I
also
just
the
couldn't.
fact that I'm like I love to eat a lot, but I don't love to cook. People always think I love to cook, and I don't love to cook. And so I think the way that we design everything, I always think of myself as the end user. So I want it to be something simple and tasty and healthy. And then we always try to do like step-by-step pictures, because then like that would motivate me to continue. And then, we have these little cartoons and jokes because sometimes you just need a cheerleader in the kitchen. And the more you practice something, the better you get. And I think for a long time, my mom is such a great cook. My sister is a chef. And so I was like, I don't need to cook. Like, I'll just go to my mom's or my sister's. And I think when I was like, no, I have to cook my own stuff, it was like, no, I actually have to work at it and practice it, because it's just like anything else that you have to work at. But I just wanted shortcuts.
I love that story because you were basically designing a cooking practice for a very particular set of needs, right? And yet you have discovered your own voice, but you also discovered a need that many people have, and they've enjoyed the kind of the global tour that you've provided them. So how have you reconciled sort of the cultural stuff, right? Like as a Chinese person, soy is in everything. Wheat is in a lot of things. Rice. I mean, staples, noodles. So how do you kind of separate that with what your body physically needs and feels better with?
So I think it was really hard at first because I think when I first started eating paleo, like I was like, there was really no way to kind of make it kind of Asian. So I would not make a lot of kind of Asian food. But then as I was doing it longer, I was missing all the foods that I loved, growing up. And I was like, no, I just have to find ways to kind of make it work. And it wasn't so much like, I think a lot of people think that I eat paleo like for like vanity reasons or whatever. I was like, no, I actually think I discovered I was celiac because I went paleo. And so my whole life, I always had GI stuff and I had joint pain and all sorts of stuff, but it's all stuff I thought everybody else had because nobody talks about, stuff, and nobody talks about, bowel movements or anything. Like it's all TMI. And so I just assumed whatever was happening to me was happening to everyone else, or I just had chronic food poisoning.
We would eat at the same restaurants. She'd be like, I think I got food poisoning. Did you? And I'm like, no, you are constantly getting the plate of food with like.
No, but then I was like, but when I was in college, I was like a food science major. And so we had all these food microbiology classes. And they're like, well, the dose equals the response. And I was like, well, maybe I'm just really sensitive and I just a little bit of whatever toxin is in this food. And so I would just kind of explain everything away and never think that, oh, maybe it's the actual food that's causing issues. And so when I cut out like grains and gluten, I literally felt so much better. And I used to get canker sores all the time. And I just thought everybody did. And I was like, Henry, do you have cancer? He's like, no. I was like, really? Whatever. Maybe it's just me. I'm just unique.
But over time, I think what ended up happening was she started thinking about how to actually replicate as best as possible substitutions for very traditional Asian ingredients in her cooking. So, first was trying to figure out a decent soy sauce substitute, for instance. And she now uses coconut aminos mixed with some fish sauce in order to get to a pretty close approximation. Rice was a difficult one. I think everybody just sort of back then was like, rice your own cauliflower. And this is before the days of finding riced cauliflower all over the supermarket aisles. This is 10, 12 years ago. And it was like, no, you go get 2 heads of cauliflower and you stick it in a food processor and you have to make it all yourself. And even things like sriracha, we were missing just like that little blast of heat. And I remember before our first book came out, we spent a lot of time, I kept pressuring Michelle to make a paleo sriracha because I was like, I miss sriracha too, and I miss having it in the house. And even though I'm fine with like a lot of the foods like rice and soy, etc., and one of our 2 sons is also like me, very, very much fine with gluten and some of these other ingredients. Michelle and our younger son are not, and so it was really sort of an imperative to try to find things that fit.
Yeah, so I think when I first started paleo, I was definitely more of a stickler, like this is exactly how it should be, and if you aren't doing it the right way, you're doing it wrong. But I think now I'm like, I don't care if you're paleo or not. Like, I just want people to cook their own meals and to recognize how food makes you feel and actually pay attention, because I never paid attention, even though you would think that I would. But I didn't. I just ate things that people told me was healthy, and I never thought about it. And so that's all I want people to do.
And as a result of that, we've sort of reincorporated a bunch of different things that aren't on the strict paleo template. And so Michelle has learned that, for instance, she can tolerate a little bit of rice, but she can't
Very
have
little rice.
But she
and I
can't
wish
have,
I could.
Yeah.
But for me, it's more like a blood sugar thing. But like our kids can eat tons and tons of rice, and I'm totally cool with them eating rice.
And so we have our trusty Zojirushi rice cooker on the counter.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so like my parents will come over and bring food, and they know that certain foods Owen and I can eat because it's prepared in a Chinese restaurant with soy sauce, and those are just not ones that Michelle and Ollie tuck into, but we've sort of figured out what works for us and what doesn't work, so that if the four of us are going out to eat now, we can figure it out. We can go to Din Tai Fung, and Owen and I will have all the dumplings, and then Michelle and Ollie have sort of the gluten-free options.
They actually have a lot of gluten-free options at Din Tai Fung. So I'm actually I'm totally cool with it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Two things. Zojirushi, yes. And for those who aren't a part of that camp, Zojirushi makes a lot of things, but most notably these amazing Ferraris of rice cookers.
Yes.
So love it. What do you love about your Zojirushi?
I just love that it makes perfect rice and I don't have to think about it. Like, some people were like, oh, the Instant Pot makes great rice. I'm like, Instant Pot does not really, the Instant Pot really should only be used for soups, stews, and braises, and maybe steaming some hard-boiled eggs and some spaghetti squash. But whenever people are like, I use it for fish or seafood, I'm like, why? Why would you do that? Or I use it for rice. I'm like, I can understand if you have no room for extra appliances. Yes, you can use your Instant Pot as a rice cooker, but then you can't use your Instant Pot to make the thing that is the substantial part of your dinner.
My favorite part of the Zojirushi rice cooker is that it sings Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. So.
It is quite delightful. And the other question, how or does traditional Chinese medicine play any part in how you approach cooking?
I don't know that it does. I think if anything, I used to kind of poo-poo whatever, when my mom would say, oh, you need to, drink this or eat this because, it'll, whatever her reasoning was, I'd be like, sure, whatever, But now I'm just more open-minded about a lot of things. I think once I kind of went down this kind of rabbit hole, I'm like, oh, there's lots of, I'm way more open-minded about lots of kind of alternative, Eastern medicine type stuff.
And there's something that actually is an interesting alignment between sort of the ancestral approach to eating that the paleo template is based off of, and a lot of these traditional Chinese foods and medicines, right? Because it is about looking to nature and ancestral foods as a way to heal your body, and a way to optimize, how you feel. And I do think that even though we might not understand a lot of the mechanisms, the mechanisms behind how certain things work, and even if in some cases it's just an amazing placebo effect, right? There is something to be said about, and our parents still, come to our house with big pots of soup.
No, but it's if they've been eating it forever and nobody's been harmed by it, I don't think I think that's fine.
Yeah. And so, I think there's still, my mom still does a lot of, Chinese herbal soups and stuff that she brings over. And we'll drink it up. She needs to add a little bit more salt to some of her soups, but she acknowledges
Let's hope she's not watching this.
I think it was more sort of the idea behind balance and having different properties of foods, and sort of taking the spirit of that and thinking about it in terms of the ingredients that you can have. Cool. So speaking of culture, we are in the midst of Lunar New Year. We've done, I guess, this is the second week. How did you all celebrate?
We had an impromptu Chinese New Year's Eve dinner. So for those of you guys who don't know, Chinese New Year's Eve is kind of the big kind of celebration, fancy food day. And I think a lot of people think it's the New Year's Day, but that's the day people eat vegetarian, and it's very kind of Spartan. And so we weren't expecting to have a Chinese New Year's Eve because I was in the midst of doing book tour, but then part of my book tour was canceled and I was able to fly home early. And then I think we all decided, we're like, oh, let's have our parents over and we'll have a Chinese New Year's Eve at our house. And so we kind of had an impromptu one where it was kind of a potluck, where I cooked and then your mom cooked. And it was nice. We actually like they're totally understanding now about it having to be gluten free, and they ate the things that I made, which is not what used to happen.
And they liked it.
Yeah.
And so we actually had you had a braised pork belly dish. My mom did a Chinese roast pork. We had a poached chicken in ginger scallion sauce. We had some shiitake mushrooms,
Like braised mushrooms.
Braised shiitake mushrooms. We had just Chinese vegetables. So it was really, and a big pot of rice. So it was very much
and a big pot of soup.
And a big pot of soup that my mom brought. So it was very nice to have both sets of in-laws celebrate with the kids. And then Michelle went off to another leg of her tour, and then my parents came over because like 3 days later, because they were like, okay, now it's time to hoyne. It's time to like have the big welcome the year dinner. And we ended up eating the exact same foods from the few days before. They were like, we can bring some more leftovers. And I'm like, no. Michelle poached a crap ton of chicken before she left because she was doing a lot of demos from our kitchen. So we ended up having lots more chicken with ginger scallion sauce. We had it again today. I think I'm
I think we're done. I think we're finally done with all of our leftovers. But that's the thing. Like I think growing up, like the children of immigrants, like you just don't throw stuff away, and there's just certain things that are like ingrained in us.
So for Lunar New Year, we have to have a lot of foods that represent good luck, wealth, good fortune, prosperity, all of those things. So what are some of the dishes that you can call out from your newest book that might be good for Lunar New Year?
So I think the holy shiitake, which is my version of my mom's kind of braised shiitake mushrooms, but it's like paleo friendly. I have a poached chicken with ginger scallion sauce, but it's just the chicken breast because as a kid.
It's the shiitake.
And then the poached chicken, because as a kid, I would just steal the breast meat from like the poached chicken. So I was like, I'm just gonna just do all breast meat. We also have a broiled fish because that also I think it always either represents prosperity and wealth or good health. And I never know which one, but I know that these things all kind of do it. And then I have a few noodle dishes because I think like the length of the noodle represents like longevity. So I have like a chicken chow mein where the noodles is made with spiralized white sweet potato. I have Singapore noodles recipe in here. I'm trying to think what else in here. Because we did do, and then we have a tassu. We have a tassu.
Dumplings.
Yeah. We have a pot sticker recipe. But
you must talk about that. You have to talk about your dumpling recipe because that's the thing. Like we have to have the dumplings at New Year's.
You know what's interesting though is I feel. Did you guys always make dumplings for your New Year's? Because I feel like for Southern Chinese, my mom did not make pot stickers as much. Like we would do it for other occasions, but not necessarily for New Year's.
I grew up in a Chinese restaurant, so we had pot stickers literally all the time.
Okay.
So and wontons and other dumplings because it was just readily available.
Because that's what people ordered.
Freezer,
yeah.
So or in the fridge, and so I can't really answer that question. It felt like it was Lunar New Year year round because we had access.
Because I know that some people and a lot of people do hot pot, but our family didn't do it for New Year's. Like sometimes they would. I mean, I guess
we did it last year.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think it's also, and I've talked to Henry about this. I think like our generation, because we are in our late 40s, our parents came in the late 60s, early 70s. And so it's almost like they wanted to assimilate us as like quickly as possible into American culture. And so we both lived with our paternal grandparents. And so we did do a lot of traditional things, but we didn't necessarily knew the reasoning behind things. Like we would just do it. And there were things that, we always had kind of like shrines to like the great grandparents. And I remember I actually was in a cultural anthropology class at Berkeley, and we were assigned another student to kind of like go to their house and kind of figure out their, cultural like background. And so, I remember bringing someone back to our house and she was noticing all these things around our house and she's like, what is that shrine or what does that mean? And I was like, I never noticed that was something unusual. Like, so there were like all these things where I was like, I don't really know the whys, but we did it. And now, like, it's interesting because our two teenage sons are really interested in the whys. And it's now very, like, it's like this whole thing about being hashtag very Asian is just something people are very proud about. And like, I love that. And like, the kids now interview our parents and they've asked them things like, I literally have no idea kind of like what my parents have been through. And they've hinted at it. They're like, oh, we escaped the war and we did this. And, you know, when we came, we didn't know anybody. And like, so there are all these things, but we also never talked about it. And so now our kids are able to like interview them. And I'm like, whoa, why don't you tell me what my parents did? Because I actually don't exactly know. Like,
It's interesting. That could be a whole other conversation, you know, sort of
yeah.
those generational experiences and how perhaps our parents don't want to share that pain with us. They want to keep us from experiencing that. I know my dad did not like talking about escaping China. But there's something about connecting with the grandkids that's different, I think. So that's cool. It's cool that Owen and Ollie have that experience. So really fantastic. You mentioned shiitake mushrooms, and you talk about the differences in your in the ingredients section. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think, you know, as with many ingredients, people just think, oh, there's one kind of that thing, but actually shiitake mushrooms.
And if you have a Chinese mother, like she's very particular about and it's not fresh shiitake, it's the dried shiitake mushrooms. And growing up, I don't even think there was fresh shiitake mushrooms available like at the store until, I don't know, like the late 80s or 90s. Like my mom only cooked with dried shiitake mushrooms. And so that's what I grew up eating. And I love that texture of like rehydrated shiitake mushrooms because it's this really nice, chewy kind of abalone texture that just brings me back. Whereas fresh shiitake is like kind of slimier and softer, and it doesn't have as much umami. And so my mom has always been very particular about her type of dried shiitake mushrooms. Like they have to be super fat. It has a little flower pattern on the top. Like it can't have the cut stem. It actually has to have like the little stem that has like the knob, so it shows that it's like grown like properly. And so, but anytime I buy it, like, and I'll buy like really expensive ones and like ones that I think are correct, I'll show it to her and say, these are not that good. You need to go to this, you know, this little Chinese herbal shop and you have to, it's not on the shelf. You have to ask for them to get it from behind the counter. And so sometimes I just wait for her to gift it to me. And that's the best way to pick it out.
But you know, for the longest time, I didn't actually realize the difference because, like Michelle, I grew up in a household where my mom would only get, and these are the thicker danko mushrooms, and the danko mushrooms are actually, or donggu in fancy use would be like the sort of the thicker mushrooms that are picked while they're still budding, and so they're not flattened out. They
they're not like super flat,
extended out like an umbrella yet. So they're very thick and chunky and meaty. The ones that are sort of more mature, the Cochin mushrooms, are actually just they're great for like stir fries, for cutting up and like adding some flavor, but it's not the same sort of main feature highlight of the dish type of ingredient that the danko mushrooms are. And so those are the ones that we try to recommend for things like, you know, the holy shiitake dish that you have in the book.
But if you're just chopping it up for like, you know, dumpling filling or meatballs or whatever, you can just buy the cheap ones. But there's also shiitake powder, which I think is kind of a magical thing that you can kind of sprinkle into stuff.
Yeah, I didn't even know that existed until we went to like, you know, H Mart or something.
Yeah, Korean markets, I think, have the shiitake powder. Because sometimes if you only have these really fancy, fat, dried shiitake mushrooms, they take forever to rehydrate. And you really have to like, you know, think ahead and like, you know, soak them in the morning so you can cook them in the evening, or like soak them overnight in the fridge because you can't really do it. And so my sister taught me a trick that she does is if she has these fat mushrooms that she's forgotten to rehydrate, she'll microplane it like dry into stuff. And I was like, oh, that's brilliant. And so that's kind of the idea that we had behind our umami stir fry powder. I'm like, well, I don't have time to remember to always rehydrate mushrooms. But if I have like a seasoning salt that has shiitake powder and garlic, ginger, and scallions, that's kind of all the stuff my mom puts in stir fry anyway. But now it's in powder form that I can just kind of sprinkle on stuff.
That's awesome. So audience, if you have questions, please throw them into the chat and I will try to read them out. Okay, we've got one. Let's see. I noticed the scallion ginger sauce in the new book uses avocado oil. A similar recipe in your other cookbook uses duck fat. Thoughts?
I think when the other recipe was the yellow book, and that came out 2017. Yeah, and so that means we were developing that like a few years before that, and avocado oil was not readily available until pretty recently. So a lot of these changes are because of what's kind of available now. And so I love duck fat. You can totally make it with duck fat, and it's delicious and amazing, but it's harder to find. Whereas avocado oil, now you can buy it at Costco, and it has a high smoke point. It has a great fatty acid profile. It's pretty neutral tasting. So that is kind of my preferred high temperature fat, because you have to heat up this oil to like 375. So it'll kind of bubble and kind of cook everything in the sauce. And so that's why I do it. But you can totally use duck fat. I mean, I would use duck fat, but it's harder for me to find.
But you also talk about, you're very specific about the avocado oil. You offer some tips on freshness as well as brands. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so at first, like when avocado oil first came out, I was like, wow, this sounds amazing, right? Like all the things I said, like smoke point, fatty acid profile, neutral taste. But then there was a UC Davis study that came out that said not all avocado oil is created equal. We bought a bunch of brands, and they were either rancid or they were, mixed with other oils, just like the whole olive oil controversy that happened a few years ago. So I think like when things are kind of hot, there's going to be some bad agents that are trying to make a buck. And so they're going to throw things out there and just assume that people will just buy it and not think about it. And so that UC Davis study really kind of like shone a light on like, hey, you got to be careful about what you buy. And so I think they specifically called out Marianne's brand and Chosen Food brands as two brands that were 100% avocado oil, and they were not rancid. And so, I mean, I think you just have to be careful. And I think that's the thing though with any oil is you have to kind of pay attention to it, keep it out of the light, keep it out of the heat, smell it. And if it smells off, it's probably gone bad, because oils can go bad and it doesn't last forever. And so you just have to be, you just have to be a smarter consumer. And luckily, Chosen Brands and Marianne's are both sold at Costco, so you can get it at a good price. And the turnover, I think, is pretty fast at Costco. But
I liked how in the book you actually put in there something about it smelling like Play-Doh if it's off.
Oh yeah, yes, it does. It does. Like you have to smell things and you have to pay attention. You can't just buy it because it's healthy. You should actually.
I just like that because I actually don't know that I would be able to like instantly identify by smelling if something was off, but I know the smell of Play-Doh so well that if I smelled Play-Doh, I'd be like, okay.
No, but I think a lot of things are off. Like when something smells off, I think people just and the problem is a lot of these ingredients are expensive, at least initially when they're first on the market, and they're rare. And so no one wants to like admit that like a $10 bottle of oil has gone bad because it's so expensive and now they can't make all the things.
Sure. And is that your everyday oil, the avocado oil?
It is high rotation. So I have avocado oil and ghee and extra virgin olive oil are probably the three I use the most. I think people are like, oh, in your red book, you used a lot of coconut oil. I'm like, yes, because at the time, that was all that was available. And at the time, like people were like, oh, you weren't supposed to cook, high temperature with olive oil. But now I think there's a lot of stuff that's come out that said, no, it's perfectly fine to use olive oil, at high temperature. But the flavor of olive oil doesn't always work for a lot of, Asian dishes. But I'm totally someone who's like, when new information comes up, it's important to learn from that and adapt. I don't think that people should eat as restrictively as possible. I mean, maybe for the first 30 days, just to kind of get a baseline, you can kind of use it to kind of start. But I love food too much to just eat the same things over and over again. So the more I learn, the more
You get to eat.
Yes.
And one more follow-up question related to oils. Somebody asked about ghee, and this person is asking about the stink factor, but I don't know if that is really.
Well, I think ghee can sometimes, definitely. I actually think ghee smells great, but again, ghee can go bad. If it smells stinky, it could very well be that it's gone bad and it's gone rancid, right? So I think if it doesn't smell right, you should always trust your nose. Your nose, even though Henry thinks that he wouldn't know if something's off, I think you just haven't admitted to yourself that it's off.
Does it smell like Play-Doh?
No, but the brand of ghee that I like to buy, and before everyone had to make it, but I like to buy Ancient Organics ghee because you can get it at Costco and it's really good and it's like a local brand to the Bay Area. But theirs smells a lot like brown butter because I think they kind of push it, where they kind of brown the milk solids before they strain it out. And that one smells really good. And so it shouldn't stink. It should smell really good.
So another question, where do you usually do your grocery shopping? Let's see.
Where does she not do her?
I know, Henry's laughing because I shop all over.
She shops at farmers markets. She shops at Costco, obviously. She will get stuff from Whole Foods and Sprouts. She'll go to Trader Joe's sometimes. We go to our local Piazza supermarket.
And then there's a Chinese market that just delivered to our house today because there's a Chinese market that if you spend over $60, they'll do home delivery and I can get all these Chinese greens.
During the pandemic, there was somebody who was organizing fruit boxes to be delivered to the library.
They still do it.
They're still doing that. So you would do that. So literally from anywhere and everywhere, I think you try to source stuff. When we're out and about, we'll go to Asian markets quite a bit. So Asian markets in the Bay Area, Asian markets in Portland. So I don't think there's any place that you don't shop.
No, in fact, I like checking out regional supermarkets that we don't have here, like in the Bay Area or in Portland, just because I like to see what is available to other people. Because I think I had assumptions. I was like, oh, maybe people can't get these paleo-friendly ingredients, but I'll go to a Kroger's and I'm like, wow, they have everything. And they have this really amazing, organic section and stuff. But I think people should just do the best they can. And I know that people are like, oh, it's really hard because I can't get 100% grass-fed and grass-finished beef, or I can't get this or that. And I think people just have to do the best they can. And I'm in a very privileged position where I can get it from all sorts of places and get stuff delivered. But I think people just have to, work within whatever they can work with.
So let's see, next question. I noticed a lot of recipes in this cookbook are ones that I've previously found on your website. How do you determine which to include exclusively in your cookbook versus share publicly online?
So that is an interesting question because if you actually count the number of recipes in our book that are from the website or from previous books, it literally is less than 20%. But I think certain ones pop out at people because they are the most popular. And so the pot stickers is in there, scallion pancakes, and then we have all-purpose stir-fry sauce, but because it's used in lots of different iterations. And so it is kind of a weird fine line, right? Because there's some people who are like, why aren't all of your recipes from the blog in the cookbooks, right? And then other people are like, I want only brand new stuff in the cookbooks. So it's always a fine line in terms of what we put in the books. But, we were very deliberate about this. We're we can't have more than 20% from another source.
At the same time,
Yeah.
there are certain foundational recipes, like the all-purpose stir-fry sauce, like magic mushroom powder, even things like chocolate ganache or whipped coconut cream in the dessert section, where they're sort of just building blocks for other recipes. There's, I don't know, like a dozen recipes in the book that utilize all-purpose stir-fry sauce, and it would be very difficult to sort of have those recipes in the book and not provide that recipe again, even though it's been in a previous book, or same with magic mushroom powder. I think some of the other ones, like pot stickers, scallion pancakes, even like the chicken chow mein that we talked about, these are ones where we love the blog. The blog is something that Michelle works on, and until this past week, when she was on tour and couldn't post on it, she posts a recipe there every single week, because that's our bread and butter, so to speak, neither of which are paleo. But like we actually spend a lot of time focused on the blog throughout the year. A cookbook comes every few years, and we'll work on it intensively. But because of that, she doesn't reserve the best recipes just for a cookbook. She really wants to share them. So if it's pot stickers,
I think it's like the best recipes up until the book goes to the printer. But then once it goes to the printer, I'm still producing, recipes that I'm really proud of, that I really love, right? And another thing, and I think this is evidenced by our iOS app, is eventually, like, the internet is going to disappear. And so what do I really want in books?
Well, the internet might not disappear,
not
but
the internet.
Our presence on the internet.
Yeah, our presence on the internet might disappear. Or the way that it's consumed is going to be very different, right? Like maybe we'll all have something implanted in our eyeballs or something. You know what I mean? Like, so it's a very different thing. And so, the things that we put in our books are things we kind of want, like,
set in stone.
Set in stone, yeah.
I think that's right, but I also think that we also don't want to keep those recipes from the blog audience just because we love it a lot, right? So if we created pot stickers like several years ago and we love that recipe a ton, and it would have been very easy to shelve that and say, let's just hold on to this for the cookbook. But instead, what Michelle wants to do is take that, put it on the blog, then also put it in the next cookbook that comes out, just because it is one of not only her favorites, but it's a fan favorite. And so the way we think about it are building blocks and sort of the classics, sort of the new classics that we definitely want to incorporate into the cookbook experience.
Great. So we just have a few minutes left, and I have a handful of questions. So I'm going to do it quick fire style. Okay. So what foods do the boys enjoy most to cook and eat?
They don't like cooking. Oh, Owen will make spam musubi because he loves spam musubi, and even had a little business during pandemic to make spam musubi. But otherwise, he doesn't like to cook. He loves eating.
He loves eating everything.
Yeah, he likes probably Japanese food best.
He loves Japanese food.
Yeah.
Like tarashi sushi. He loves katsu.
Yeah.
Cool.
And Ollie loves eggs, so he makes himself an egg for breakfast. Or actually, like 2 eggs for breakfast in the morning, and then he makes an egg.
A gluten-free egg sandwich.
Gluten-free egg sandwich for lunch every single day, and that's been the same since he was tiny.
But I think his favorite food is like my mom's cooking.
Yeah.
Like, and as much as my mom just loves to say, yes, your child loves my food best. And I know that
she'll come over and she'll make him lamb chops, and he loves that.
Nice.
Yep. Whatever.
Nice.
Always the best.
The best.
Yes.
All right, Henry, your shirt. People want to know where they can get that shirt.
You got this for me.
Oh, I don't know if they sell it anymore. It was, I can't even remember it's that Asian East-West Players.
Is it that?
Oh yeah, East-West Players. So it's the nation's premier Asian American theater. This was a quote that Sandra Oh said, and they sold these shirts as a fundraiser, but I don't know if they sell them anymore.
But
Somebody in the chat just said that they bought one on Etsy. So they're out there. Google it.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Have you ever subbed walnuts for mac nuts in your nut ricotta?
I haven't. I have done blanched and soaked almonds, and I've done cashews, but I have not tried walnuts. I'm sure it would
Okay.
work. But
So hopefully, Catherine, that helps answer your question. Will the app be coming out for Android?
no.
Okay.
We barely want to keep it up for iOS.
The problem with iOS, and we didn't know this was before we started with cookbooks.
So we created an app before this was the first thing we ever did outside of the blog. And this was when iPads first came out. And there was a big article in the New York Times about how iPads were going to revolutionize cookbooks, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, wow, I think that's amazing. We bought an iPad and we thought it would be amazing. But what we realized is app development is super duper duper expensive if you're not technical.
It's not like putting together a blog on WordPress
Yes.
and pushing it out. It is hiring an app development
Yes.
company that
Which
goes
is
out
tens
there.
of thousands of dollars. And anytime Apple changes the iOS, it can break the app.
And then we have to go back to
Yeah.
the app development company to do it. So
And nobody wants to pay more than 99 cents. So it just is not going to happen. And so we will maintain the iOS app as it happens. And I do add new blog recipes to the app. Like whenever we add it, they get another new recipe. And so we're always there's probably over 300 something recipes for like $5.99. I don't charge anyone extra, but one day that is all going to go away.
But the Android app, when we asked our app developer, it's a company based here in the Bay Area. They do lots of really cool apps for big companies like, Polestar
and so we were like their tiny
and
little.
stuff. So we're their tiny little charity project. But even then, when I asked, okay, if we were to port this to Android, what would the cost and timing be? And they'd have to assign a team here and a team overseas to work on it. And it's essentially the cost of a year of college tuition. And I was like, yeah, I don't know that.
No. And then anytime it breaks, people are like, I've been using your app for 10 years and it broke and I want my money back. And I'm like, really? You don't feel like you've gotten your money's worth, like the $5.99 that you paid that one time that you used for 10 years that you spend on like a coffee?
And the funny thing, like she stopped doing this years ago, but in the early days, even though we don't accept the money, like Apple gets the money for this, Michelle would actually
I would just Venmo people their money back.
She would PayPal people their money back. And I was like, we're losing money every time.
I was like, I
just don't want to have
Michelle.
I know. I'm money stupid, but I draw the line at doing an Android version.
Do either one of your kids like programming, or are they inclined with computers at all? I was going to say you can hire a high schooler to work on your app.
Other things that could be helpful in the future, because he really likes he really loves audio engineering, and so he's been editing Owen's podcast. Owen has a side podcast that he's working on that has not yet been released.
And Owen does a ton of graphic design and a lot of art stuff, just like Henry. So we don't have anyone that does like the coding and the
Though one day maybe we could, at least I could pass off my piece to the kids, and then you'd have to find somebody else who actually knows how to cook to pass off.
Well, there are other options. All I'm saying is that there are other options. I work in tech as well, and like there's a way around that. So, and then let's see. I think we have maybe. Will you re-release your doll?
No. Well, I mean, we have some dolls. We actually have a bunch of dolls in storage. And so I think when we first started selling it, it was such a pain because I literally was like sending them out myself. And so now we just give away stuff. So if you come to a signing, I'll probably bring dolls to give away, but I'm not selling. And then you have to report sales tax. It's just a big pain. So I was like, no, we're not selling. I will give them away just because I'm money stupid.
That was a really fun project though. The action figures, the vinyl action figures were one of the most fun little side projects.
Money stupid project.
It was a completely money stupid project, but it was so fun to work with toy designers to sort of figure out what the little accessories were going to look like and the package
and
design.
People are always like, wow, your branding is so great. I'm like, no, like you have an action figure of this. I'm like, yeah, we paid someone to make it. It's not like someone created this and said, here's the doll.
No, we were just money stupid.
No, we were just money stupid. We just, we're like, let's make this.
We're indulgent.
Yeah.
Well, Funko Pop is based up in this area. Maybe they'll make one and then they can handle all of
Yeah.
that. Looks like we're out of time here. So since Laura has popped back up on screen,
There was a
thank you.
question about your tour, though. Are you going to St. Louis,
Oh.
or do you have any other live appearances left on your tour?
Right now, we just have a San Francisco event at the end of March at Book Passage, and then maybe in New York in March, like in New York City, maybe, but that's not definite yet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We'll
I
see,
don't know.
we'll have to see. I think she's had a number of tour events that have been canceled due to snow and due to
COVID. Yeah.
and a bunch of other things. So I think never say never, but
Yeah.
we're sort of temporarily putting a pause
Yeah.
on plans for now.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Hsiao-Ching. Thank you for such a great conversation. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. And of course, thank you, Michelle and Henry, and congratulations on your wonderful third book.
Well, thank you for stocking your book. We
And-
love.
Oh my
book
gosh, of
marketing.
course,
Like,
of course. No, I
Oh.
forgot. Oh, yes, and Hsiao-Ching,
No,
Chinese soul
no.
food, vegetarian Chinese
the
soul food.
vegetarian version, which is green.
I hope that we will see you sometime soon. I've meant to mention at the beginning that we've hosted you since your very first book, and you've always been such tremendous supporters of independent bookstores. And thank you so much for that. It really means a lot to all of us. So thank you for that. And
No, thanks for
congratulations.
having the most amazing bookstore ever. Like,
we
Oh, well,
love
that's
Book
really
Larder.
kind.
We get warm and fuzzies every time we visit.
like
so.
if you love cookbooks as much as I do, like this is like the mecca. It's like amazing.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
Have a lovely evening, everyone. Books are available. Thank you. And we will post this to our YouTube soon. Stay safe and healthy, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.